Greetings and welcome back, everyone. Last week we imported a bunch of drum tracks into Superior Drummer 3 and converted them to Midi using the tracker. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people stop and find themselves disappointed with the result. And this is especially noticeable on hi-hats, to a certain degree the snare, as well as the ride. To get a perfectly believable drum track, you have to edit the MIDI. And this is absolutely crucial if you want it to sound like a proper drum kit. The big secret to getting a great result is using different articulations and take time to get the velocity levels right. Already done a little bit off camera here, but I'm going to show you the basic principles of how to get a great result after we're done editing the MIDI information. Let's just play the intro to the song here. One thing I notice is I'd like the hi-hats here to be not quite as wide open articulation. So I think I'll try to move it up to the open edge 2. Just select all these hits. Now, before we move them, hold down your shift button. This will restrict horizontal movement, so you don't move the hits in time. We do the same thing with this stray hit here, and we should already have a better sounding hi-hat. Almost there. What we'll do now is take the last ones of each phrase, move them down to open edge 3 perhaps. That way they'll ring through the tom fills. Let's try that. Yeah, I'm liking that. And that's pretty much how I played it to begin with. Next thing now is look at the velocities. And to get these right, you have to think like a drummer. You need to factor in how a drummer actually plays. So the first thing we'll do here is select all of these ones, pull down all of the velocities. If you watch a good drummer play, they don't hit their cymbals as hard as you think they might do. Now here, as the bulk of the time signatures here are 6/8, we tend to divide our mini phrases, so to speak, in 3. So every third hit will be harder than the other 2. And that's typically at the same time as we hit a kick drum or a snare. Very often at around 90 or thereabout in velocity is good on hi-hat, on the hardest hits. A good rule when it comes to hi-hats is no 2 hits right next to each other at the same velocity level, because no drummer actually does that. There are slight variations between every single hit they do. We can actually bring these up a bit, I think. yeah, I think we got the basic idea there. And unfortunately, when it comes to the hi-hats, there is no shortcut to doing that. It takes time, but it's well worth doing it. So just keep the end goal in sight. You want a natural sounding drum kit? You need to do this work. Now to show you some other features here, let's just select all of these hi-hats. We have some sliders down to the left here. I have a velocity slider, which can bring up or down all of these hits. I think I'm bringing them just a bit down. Then we have a dynamic slider, where we can increase or decrease the range between the lowest and the highest velocity. Then we have the randomize, which is really cool. This can often work quite well in some cases. Now what we're going to do here is quantize these hi-hat hits. I like to do this in sections. Don't select the whole song and try to quantize everything. You'll get some wonky results out of that. So let's keep those selected, and we have the quantize slider up top here. There's a button to quantize to maximum, which I don't recommend you use. We have a swing function, which can be cool in some cases. That really depends on the genre you're working in. And we also have a randomize function here as well. I tend to use this quantize slider here and just pull it up until I see it's roughly where it should be. I don't like quantizing 100%. That can get a bit stiff sounding. But again, this really does depend on the song and genre you work in. Between 60 and 70 is often enough. If necessary, I will move the odd note manually afterwards. So let's check out how that sounds. Yeah, those lower ones are a bit too low, so we'll pull those up a bit. Let's try that. Nice. Some of these notes are perhaps a bit quiet still, but that's something that you may want to go in and adjust once you get the rest of the instruments for your mix. And while we're at the intro here, you can take some time and quantize the bass drum hits a bit. 1/16 should be fine. Let's try that. Yeah, that looks okay. And while we're at it, we're going to pull down the velocity on the whole kick track. While this is a bit of a prog metal type track, no drummer kicks the drum that hard. And this is also true for the snare drum. 127, you're using all the force you have in your body, hitting a drum as hard as it possibly can. And what happens then is you choke the drum, so it doesn't sound as good as it should. So pull them down a bit. Never use 127 on any hit. That's what I recommend, at least. You can always use transient shapers and compression later in the mix to get that punch that you want. That's a much better way to go about it. On snare drum in particular, as well as toms, if you have everything at 127, you will get that machine gun effect. And that's a dead giveaway that it's a Midi drum track. The hard hits between 100 110 is okay. That's a pretty heavy backbeat. It may sound a little disappointing while you're doing the MIDI editing, but once you're done with the final mix, that will pay off. Same thing here with the snare drum. Avoid having the same velocity level on adjacent hits. And typically, ghost notes are very low in velocity. And try to keep them there, because when you start adding compression and such in the mix, those will creep up. And if your velocity is too high, it starts to sound like regular hits instead of ghost notes. And here's another reason why I prefer doing the editing inside Superior Drummer. When you expand each drum note here, you get all of the articulations that is available to you, and you don't have to search around for note numbers or things like that in a DAW MIDI editor. There's nothing more frustrating than trying to find whatever articulation you need in a piano roll. It's quite okay to have most of these on a center articulation, but it is really important to vary these every now and then. Use an edge or a rimshot articulation every now and then really helps. You can try adding a rimshot articulation when the floor tom is hit at the same time. I think we have one there. Yeah, I like that. We can have a couple of ghost notes on an edge, or a better way of calling it is off center. Because no drummer will hit exactly in the center of the drum all of the time. And this is especially true when you have a lot of notes in a short time. That one in the center and that one off center, and we can pull that up a bit. With the right here, let's see what we can do with that one. A bit of a flam here. The cool thing we can do there is move one of them to the bell. And the same thing with the flam on the snare. A cool thing to do there is have, let's say, the first hit off center or edge, and the left hand following that on a rimshot. That's a really cool trick to do. Oi. And let's do a couple of bars on the hi-hats here. So we have the rough velocity levels quite good there. In this case, I'm not quite liking the closed tip articulation. It's a bit too clean for this genre. So I'm going to move it to the closed edge. One thing I like to do when playing is on the one is open the pedal up a bit. So we can try the open edge nil there. The same as the closed edge, but slightly more open. Same there. And typically before a fill, I will loosen up the pedal quite a bit. So let's try like that. Yeah, I'm liking that. You can also hear now why it's absolutely crucial to capture the ghost notes in the snare. Those play a really big part in having your drums sound fairly natural. Anyways, that's a run through of the most basic things that need to be done to get a good sounding drum track. One more thing I can show you up here is the pencil tool, which is what you need to use to insert notes that are missing or cool new things. This is very basic stuff there. Please note that if you're using the pencil tool and if you click on one of the notes you already have, you delete that one. And once you're done editing the MIDI, you can drag and drop the track down here into your DAW. If you want to use another plugin for your sounds, or generally I tend to keep it inside Superior Drummer when it's time for mixing. Please note that if you drag it into your DAW and still use Superior Drummer for the sounds, you have to mute the file inside Superior Drummer, or you'll get a double playback. You have a mute function by right-clicking on the track there, or just remove it altogether from inside the plugin. in case you need to edit stuff. I found the Midi editor inside Superior Drummer better than a lot of DAWs. If you've used Cubase, this looks very familiar. And what's probably the last video in this series will be on processing the individual drum tracks from Superior Drummer in Reaper, so I can show you how I would approach mixing these tracks. Until then, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a like or a comment, share the video, and I'll see you in the next video.